Okay, so welcome everybody to Hasidus from the holy city of Tzfat, Israel. So just first of all, just to address what we were talking about, from everything I've put together, we're still the safest place in the world. Hashem is definitely with us, protecting us, and it really seems like we're in the final moments. I was at a nice Fabrenga the other night, and somebody said this is the 10 plagues for the enemy. So with Hashem's help, we're going to see a destruction of evil. It needs to be destroyed, like a cancer. We've been living with this kind of as underground for a while. Then it's kind of exposed itself, and it's really quite sad to see how many. It's one side. It's good to see how many supporters there are of Israel, how many good people there are. It's also sad to see how many. I don't really see them as bad people, more like brainwashed people. Those people that are kind of violently cheering for the evil are obviously evil, but those people that are just kind of brainwashed and supporting, it's actually, I guess, more of our task to spread more truth so they can see the difference between good and evil, which has really been working very hard for a long time to convince them that evil is good. As the Rebbe says, that some they see darkness as light and light as darkness. So, but what I really want to focus on today's class is two main important concepts. And the first is kind of overcoming hurt and pain that we might have experienced. And the second is like being able to not get distracted. It says, we should take the satan. We should remove the Satan from before us and from behind us. So what is the Satan before us? The Satan before us is something that looks good. This world is such a world in which it's very easy to fool people, fool our eyes by the way things appear. And when something appears, it looks good. This morning I got fooled. I went to a restaurant. I love cheesecake. It's such a good looking cheesecake. And so, I succumbed to the temptation. I bought the cheesecake, and as I tasted it, first of all, it wasn't that cheesy. I figured it was, I don't know what kind of oils or whatever they put into it. It didn't make my body feel good. So, I learned a lesson. But yet we all go through that in life, things that look really good, and yet they're not as good as they are in reality. But this becomes a very big problem. We've mentioned this before, but it actually, today I came up with a little technique of how to overcome the problem, which is what I want to share. And often in life, we see people that look good, right? So he who mustn't be named, the former president of the United States, which convinced millions and millions, tens of millions of people in America to follow his way. And it's really what happens to all, cults. There's somebody that really looks good and they speak well and everything seems good. But really behind it all is just narcissism. It's just a desire for power. It's really evil. It's really the opposite of good. And this is really how man fell into sin, where Adam Rishon, according to Chassidus, he looked at the Mother HaKlippas, the realm of evil, and it basically is arrogance. And there's a certain tendency within us to desire it, to like it. What is addiction? You took something, it felt good, and you want it again. And so he became addicted to arrogance itself, pride, and this became the challenge of man to be able to either get rid of pride, or even more importantly, to have pride in what is right and not pride in what looks good, pride in what is good. And so to overcome that pride, a person actually has to take pride in Hashem. Because ultimately, there's a part of us that's seeking to be bigger, seeking to be, connected to greatness. And when we actually think about it, the entire universe is like a dot compared to the universe above it, which is like a dot compared to the universe above it, which is like a dot compared to the universe above it, and a dot compared to the universe above it. And all of that is literally like not even a dot compared to Hashem. It's like nothing, all nothing. So when we actually think about, quote unquote, the size of Hashem, the capacity of Hashem, the love of Hashem, the intelligence of Hashem, he's the real big one. He's infinitely big compared to everything else, which relative to him is so small, it's like it doesn't even exist. And so once we can put our kind of our ego towards Hashem, then our connection to Hashem, our ego flips away from maybe people that look good, that we, are narcissistic and that we may fall for the trap, to Hashem himself, who is really good. And that's why ego for Hashem is actually a good thing, because ego itself is not a problem. It's just when the ego is about the wrong thing, which is whether I get egotistical about myself, and then my desires become very important, egotistical about somebody else, and then their desires become very important. But being egotistical about Hashem is good because his desires are very important. They are what is right and what is true in this world. So this is one very powerful technique. This is really the whole idea of davening, to connect to the greatness of Hashem. And when we connect to the greatness of Hashem, then naturally the space that we're in is a holy and good space. The next thing that's really important is a very powerful concept, and that is, I've said it before, but it kind of came a little bit clearer to me, that there's a concept called repression and depression. So depression is when a person is very interesting how this works. But if you think about it for a second, like, let's say the person is, God forbid, thinking about committing suicide. So it's a bizarre thing to think about. What benefit could there be to the person to, God forbid, commit suicide? It doesn't make any sense. Except if, imagine for a second that somebody, I don't know, came, let's use a better example, a mosquito came and your mosquito was biting you. Okay, you forgive it once, twice, and then imagine it's just nonstop biting you, buzzing in your... So eventually it can be that the person just wants to kill the mosquito. He wants to get rid of this factor that's bothering him. And the same thing is, unfortunately, the way I see it is that 80% of depression is caused by anxiety, which I think is statistically correct. So what's happening is that the thing that's bothering you basically is your own body. So this translates into something very interesting psychologically, which is that this can also happen outside of a person. In other words, not that a person is really bothering themselves, but a person can be made to feel like they are the source of their own problem. For example, let's say you have a parent and the parent snaps at the child and, I don't know, says something very mean to the child. So now the child doesn't think, oh, my parent had a bad day. The child thinks, oh, I must have done something bad. And therefore the child, once again, just like if the person is in pain, and that pain is causing them depression because they are a source of pain, and there's the other side of themselves that kind of, if you want to call it, is angry at themselves, wants to get rid of that source. So also if a person causes somebody they love to be mean to them, then they may turn on themselves and be upset with themselves. So I mentioned this before, that basically all of bullying and anti-Semitism is all basically to make the person effectively hate themselves from somebody who unfortunately does hate themselves already. And so once we understand its psychological reality, then it's just the issue of the person that's doing it. It's not the issue of the person that is being done to. And then a person can really step out of the issue and really see themselves as a pure, beautiful soul, which they are. And the effect of this bullying, etc., doesn't really affect them anymore. Okay, so those are the 2 points that I wanted to bring out. Any questions on the subject? Okay. So maybe we'll just, I know this is a little bit of a short class, but I felt these were 2 very valuable points that I wanted to share. So maybe we'll just do a little meditation on these 2 points to help us integrate them. So you can take a deep breath. And breathe in through the nose. Let it out through your mouth. And another. And you could let it out. Breathe in Hashem. Breathe out all your stresses and your fears. And the first idea is the idea that really what seems beautiful or big and powerful actually is not. It's just a temporary either reality. Even a beautiful fruit eventually decays. And certainly all people, unfortunately. And certainly somebody that looks almighty and powerful is not. There's nobody that a little virus can't kill. So nobody's really all that powerful. And the only real power is Hashem, that he creates everything from every moment, all the universes, he creates us, he gives us life, he gives us Torah, he gives us direction. So once we understand that, that's the only source of real power. And then we put our connection, our ego desire towards Hashem. And this is very healthy because ego for Hashem is positive because Hashem is positive. And the other is this idea that we have to realize that if we've been shamed in the past and we've taken it personal, we were not the cause of that shame. That came from somebody that was just jealous that we were okay, and they had taken on usually a narcissistic identity based on shame. We've said this before, but the person who created the term narcissism actually called it narcissistic wounding, that the ego can be hurt. That creates this kind of image of perfection. That image of perfection is only there to kind of protect us from inner shame and outer shame. And so once we realize that the truth of the matter is that nobody really can shame anybody, nobody has the right to be the judge of anybody. I mean, the only person we have the right to judge is ourselves. Maybe a parent to a child. The Rebbe says only when there's that love, the level of parent to child. But otherwise, judging is actually just kind of a form of abuse, whether we realize it or not. And so, in conclusion, we have to let go. Just imagine all the shame that you ever experienced as a little black red circle, and just imagine that red circle wherever that is in your body. Imagine that Hashem loves you unconditionally, and imagine that as light, and then automatically when there's light, the darkness disappears. And if you can imagine that, you can kind of release the negativity from you, and instead of feeling that shame, go back to feeling that healthy pride in yourself, that we're holy and good and beautiful people. L'chaim v'levracha. Any questions?